All right, so thank you everyone for coming to this meeting for the purpose of stopping AI. We're going to have sort of a talk by David Krueger here, our expert on the subject of AI, and then that'll be about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then we'll sort of go over what we can actually do to prevent the harms of these very powerful systems. So without further ado, David Krueger.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. Thank you to Stop AI for inviting me, and thank you all very much for being here. Before I jump into this talk, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me, my background, where I'm coming from, all this stuff. So, I'm an AI professor at the University of Montreal. I've been in the field for about a dozen years. For the last 3 years, I was a professor at the University of Cambridge. So I started studying AI in 2012 and then formally in 2013, right at the beginning of what was called the deep learning revolution. And deep learning is really the main technology that has gotten us to where we are in AI. And I was concerned before I'd heard about deep learning about the social implications of AI and what it might do to society at a large scale. And I just didn't think it was something that was going to happen in my lifetime. And that changed in 2012 when I heard about deep learning. And I realized I had to get involved in the field in order to try and shape and steer the technology and where it was going and what what it had the potential to do. Now at the time, I was worried already that AI might lead to human extinction, that we might lose control over AI once it got sufficiently advanced and powerful, and it would then take over the world and kill everybody. And at the time, I was only aware of sort of, internet randos who seemed concerned about this. And so I was one of the very first people, I thought for a while that I was the first person to get into the field in order to understand, what the experts thought about this risk and why they didn't seem to be talking about it and addressing it. And I thought that I would find like one of three things when I got into the field. I would hopefully find that there were just really good reasons why we had nothing to worry about, and this was just tinfoil hat people who didn't really understand what was really going on with the technology. But I thought I might also find that the field was full of people who just really viewed AI as sort of the next natural stage of evolution and didn't care if that meant that humans would go extinct. They sort of were cheering on, the AI to wipe us out. Or I thought maybe, people just weren't really thinking about it, and they just hadn't really come across these arguments. They thought it seemed kind of too far off or too sci-fi, or just weren't the type of people to think about the impact of their work, and just we're just basically nerds who just liked doing interesting research, and sort of bought this this line that I think is very common in society, that all technology is good, and it's sort of society's job to figure out what to do with the technology. Your job as a researcher is just to make more of it. And it was mostly the last thing, this thing where people just weren't thinking about it, is what I realized when I got into the field. There are a few people in the field of AI who have this sort of pro-human extinction view. They are out there, who think that AI is it's good if AI replaces us. But a lot of people in the field just haven't thought about this that much. Now, when I got in the field, right, I was kind of one of the only people thinking about this, and a couple years later, one of the main AI professors, Stuart Russell, a professor here at Berkeley, who wrote what is the main artificial intelligence textbook, started telling everybody, this is a problem. We don't know how to control AI systems and get them to do what we want. And in fact, because of that, when they get powerful enough, they will act against our goals. We won't be able to shut them off, and that will lead to the end of humanity. And so we need to figure out how to control AI. And that was about 10 years ago. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, great. This is a world-class expert who understands this problem and is telling people about it to wake up the world. And I thought maybe that would sort of be enough, and then the world would kind of understand what was happening and respond appropriately. And it made a little bit of a difference. And he gave a lot of talks, at high-profile events, like to the UN and stuff like that. And it meant that now, when I talk to other people in the field, I could talk about Stuart Russell, and that lended some legitimacy to my point of view. At the time, I was just a master's student, so people weren't necessarily taking my views very seriously. And over time, I kept feeling that way, like, okay, finally, we're there. Finally, the field has understood what we're doing and is taking it seriously and is going to do something, differently. We're going to wake up and change what's happening. And the last, big moment for that for me was 2 years ago, 2023, with the release of ChatGPT. This was really the moment that I think a lot of the world learned about AI and started to really, pay attention, and their ears perked up and stuff. Now, to me, this was just the latest in a long series of dramatic, rapid improvements in the technology. And like I said, in 2012, when I started working on deep learning, I was like, wow, this might become superhuman in a decade or two. And I think at the time, again, people were very skeptical of this. And this was one of the main reasons when I talked to other researchers or talked to people that they thought that this wasn't worth worrying about. They're like, it's too far off, it's too far off. And in 2023, that really started to change. People started to recognize that maybe this technology is actually on the path to human-level intelligence and superhuman intelligence. And with that, we got some serious attention. We got governments actually starting to say, hey, this is an existential risk, meaning a risk to the future of humanity, a risk of human extinction. We had an international summit on that topic, and I was working with the UK government to help produce that summit. And I was hopeful, but I was, after 10 years, I was worried that still maybe, this wasn't going to be enough. And, it feels now like that was kind of this brief flash in the pan. And, something I need to mention is that another big thing that happened in 2023, about 2 years ago now, is that the two most famous AI researchers in the world who basically invented deep learning, the technology that has driven all this progress, both suddenly became very worried about exactly this problem and started telling the world about this. So this is Yoshua Bengio, who I knew from my time as a grad student at the University of Montreal, and Geoffrey Hinton. And, the two of them are really, they're like rock stars in AI. Everybody knows them. Yoshua used to be literally mobbed with people asking for his autograph at these academic conferences. So I thought, if these guys start saying, hey, there's a 20%, 50% chance that AI is going to kill everyone, that, the world would pay attention and we would stop. We would stop doing it, because that's obviously what you want to do when you're building a technology that has this potential to kill everyone. Unfortunately, that's not always how the world works. So, we had this moment of attention, and then I would say, the companies realized that they needed to stop speaking openly and honestly about this, and kind of the mask came off. So the companies that have been developing this technology for a long time have been sort of paying lip service to this idea that it needs to be safe. That, yeah, there's some risk, but, we're gonna, our main goal is actually to prevent that risk, to manage the risk. That's what we're doing here. We're trying to figure out how to make it safe. And really in 2024, I think, or even 2023, it started to be very clear that these companies weren't about making AI safe, they were about making it first, so that they would have the chance to control it and control the future. And so, do they believe, do they understand that what they're doing can destroy the world? I think they do. A lot of people think they don't. In any case, they're gambling with our future, and this is completely unacceptable. And I'm, I want to say I'm shocked, but I'm very cynical from all of my time in the field. I'm dismayed, I'm disappointed, I'm really, really upset, that the world has not realized, how important this is and done something about it. And instead, the politicians have basically let corporate interests, again, distract them from, what is really an incredibly urgent and important problem. So, let me see. Yeah, what else do I want to tell you? I think most of this I might be covering in my talk, but let me just see if there's any other points I wanted to make sure to stress before I do that. I guess, yeah, in case you couldn't tell, I'm frustrated, and I feel like we're running out of time, and I feel like, working sort of within the system, which is what I've been doing throughout my career. I've been trying to convince other researchers, trying to convince policymakers, convince governments that we need to either figure out, how to make AI safe or not make it at all. And when I say make it safe, I mean that's nowhere near, that's not in the cards right now. Anybody who tells you that, we know how to make this safely or we're doing it safely or responsibly is lying to you. That's just like a known fact, basically, within the field. It's a gamble, it's a risk, and people say things like, "Oh, it's only a 1% chance or like a 2% chance that we're all going to die," and that's sort of like the optimist or skeptic take right now within the field. So I think it's greater than 50% personally, and I think this is probably going to happen within the next 10 years. Probably in about 5 years. It could happen, really at basically any moment at this point. So we urgently need to stop, and, we need everyone to realize the situation we're in so that everyone can do whatever's in their power to make that happen. Yeah. And, I guess another thing is I have a lot of friends in this field, and I've been feeling, increasingly frustrated by the attitude that I think is common among AI researchers, which is, I think there's some amount of just, hey, this is good, it's probably going to be great, let's do it. Yeah, maybe there's some risk of everything going horribly wrong, but the upside is so great. And then I think there's also an attitude of this is really a conversation for us to be having, us big shot people who, know how the technology works and have all the power. And I think this is, it's kind of disgusting, basically, the way that I think the field has betrayed the public trust here. So every time this has come up in the media, in conversations over the last 10 years, there's been people from the field basically jumping in, to talk to journalists and experts and say, nothing to see here, don't worry about it, we've got it covered, Yeah, sure, there's going to be superhuman AI in a couple decades, which is already an incredibly alarming thing. But don't worry about it, we'll figure it out by then, or somehow that's not a thing to be worried about. And now very few people are saying in a couple decades, even the skeptics are saying, several years, so that's plenty of time. It's so far off, we don't have to worry about it. So this is kind of, the sort of attitude that I've become really frustrated with, and so that's why I'm here today, is because I feel like, you guys have the right to know, and the public really needs to be informed about all of this and what's going on. So, I haven't been tracking my time. I guess I'm good. All right, cool. So I'm going to jump in now to my slides because, I think it's important that you don't just, completely take my word for all this, but to educate and inform you guys some about, the situation. So yeah, my talk here is what you need to know about AI. Yeah, I guess first, this is kind of my summary of everything I just said. AI companies are actively working at building super intelligent AI, super intelligent machines. I didn't really say this part yet. Nobody knows how they work. That's pretty important. The people building these AI systems acknowledge that we do not know how they work. We know how to build them, we don't know how they work. It's a really interesting paradox. Yeah, so, if you listen to Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he's like, oh, it's more like, evolved or grown. It's like, we're sort of like training a dog or something, right? And, it's just wild that, that nobody knows how these things actually work. This is likely to lead to everybody dying, like I said, everybody in this room, everyone we care about, and I'm used to giving academic talks. I'm used to, I guess, trying to speak about this in a typical academic tone, and yeah, I've realized more and more like that just feels really odd and inappropriate, and I'm trying to, when I'm speaking to other researchers, treat this as like something real that's really happening because it is. Yeah, and like I said, these concerns have repeatedly been dismissed and ignored, even as they've become increasingly, popular and mainstream. So, when we're at the point where the most well-known and respected and regarded AI researchers and the leaders of all the companies building AI are saying this could kill everyone, and yet many, government leaders and public figures are still dismissing the concern. We need to look to other ways. Cool. So I'm going to try and give you just a really quick idea of what AI is, like as a technology. And then I'm going to provide some evidence that what I'm saying is true, besides what I've already told you anecdotally, that AI is a risk to humanity. And then I want to give you some sense of like how fast the progress has been, which, I've been witnessing this myself basically for, the last 10 or 12 years, and it's really incredible. It's really frightening. And some of where this is headed in the next couple years. So I mentioned deep learning before. Deep learning is another name for neural networks. These are basically systems that are modeled very loosely after the human brain or the brains of other animals. So basically all these circles represent like neurons like you have in your brain, and then these edges represent the connections between the neurons. And the idea is we put some sort of input in here, like the pixels of an image, and then we get something out, like, a prediction about what the image is. Or maybe we put in some words and we get some other words out. That's how like language models like ChatGPT work. So everything here is basically, giant matrices of numbers. So the inputs and the weights and everything are these giant matrices of numbers. And in fact, for like some of the state-of-the-art models, we're talking about something like over 1 trillion numbers here. So this is why I say nobody knows how they work, is because to understand how it works, you need to understand, those trillion numbers. And, just for a sense of scale, if you wanted to, by hand, copy down 1 trillion numbers, this would take you hundreds of lifetimes. So if you just wanted to copy those numbers down, hundreds of lifetimes. So the idea that we could understand what's going on inside these models, properly and in depth and detail is just clearly impossible. So that's basically the nature of the systems we're building. And they're trained in a couple different ways, but one of the most, I think, obviously concerning aspects of how they're trained is with this approach called reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning is designed to teach an AI system how to do some task, maybe like play chess, maybe like, control a killer robot. And it does this by basically turning this into a game. And there's some score, which we call like the reward, and the goal of the AI is just to maximize that score. And so there's some, it makes some observation of the environment. That'd be like looking at the chessboard and where the pieces are, and then it takes some action, like moving one of the pieces. And then eventually maybe it'll get like a score of 1 if it wins the game, and -1 if it loses, and 0 if it draws, something like that. And then the idea is that somehow we're going to teach the AI to figure out how to get lots of reward, how to win the game, or if this is a game where the points just go up, 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 then get as many points as possible. And importantly, like the most important thing to know about reinforcement learning is that the basic principle driving this is that the ends justify the means. So the agent is supposed to get high reward, get lots of points, and we don't really care how it does that. It's just find whatever actions you can, whatever behavior you can that makes that score go up. So think about like, a sociopath who just wants to make as much money as possible. And I think we will literally see people build AI systems that are designed that way in the near future, and that are acting, doing whatever they can in the world to make as much money as possible. Manipulating people, cheating, robbing, stealing, whatever. And of course you can say, well, that's against the law, so will I catch them, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I think this is going to get harder and harder as AI gets better. So that's my very quick description of the basic nature of the technology. I also want to give you just some reference points in terms of, your experiences and other things that you might have better intuitions for. So there's three that I'll give. One is computer programs, the other is biological intelligence, and the last is science fiction. So AI is similar in many ways to conventional computer programs. I've listed a few of them here. So it's made of code that we can inspect. So we can, in fact, look at all of those numbers, those trillion parameters they're sometimes called, if we want to. So it's true that we can look inside and see what's going on. It's just impossible for us to actually make sense of it. It's easy, basically trivial to copy an AI. So you just take those numbers and you just copy them somewhere. You can't do that by hand, but we can do that very quickly with a computer. AI systems are brittle and buggy. Now this is something that may go away in some sense over time. Right now they are often not robust and they do weird, unexpected things. And I think that we should expect some version of that to persist. I might talk about that more later. AI, just like a computer program, can edit its own code, and it can control physical systems. These are things that are just really basic properties of computers. I put them there because when I was a kid and I was first starting to think about AI, it wasn't obvious to me that this was the case, that you could have a program that changes its own code, or that controls like a physical system, because I just didn't know much about how computers work. But yeah, these are just like very trivial to implement in any sort of software. Differences with computer programs, well, AI is like very fuzzy and imprecise in a way that computer programs are. So when you think of a computer program, you might think of like, if-then statements or like, instructions where you say, do this, do that to the computer. So AI isn't like that. It's, the actions of the AI are somehow controlled by all of these numbers, the parameters. And we know, vaguely how that works, but again, we don't understand it in any detail. It's not programmed by hand, right? There's no way that we could possibly program an AI system with a trillion parameters by hand. Instead, it's sort of learned in some sense based on data. And this makes it way too complex to understand or to verify any properties of it. And there's a sense in which AI systems can't really be debugged. So when there's something wrong with a conventional computer program, and you notice that, you can go in and you can fix it. You can be like, okay, there's this bug, it's this line of code, we change that line of code, problem solved. With an AI system, we just regularly encounter behavior that we don't want, that we find objectionable, and we don't know how to fix it. So you can try and train the system more to not do that thing, and sometimes it'll stop doing that thing, but then sometimes it'll start doing something else that's as bad or even worse. So this is just like open research problems that the field is actively working on, is like understanding how these things work and how to control their behavior. Comparing with humans, AI, unlike a computer program, it's sort of complex and messy. It can be unpredictable because we don't understand how it works. It can learn from experience. So if you think about one of the hallmarks of like biological intelligence is that systems can get smarter by experiencing some new environment or reading something or getting some new data. This is true of AI as well. And there's a very real sense in which AI can make plans and decisions based on goals and values. So these are all things that might be kind of surprising if you sort of think about AI as just another computer program, but are just technically accurate descriptions of how it works. Unlike humans, though, AI really is an alien kind of intelligence. It doesn't have the same, shared concepts and values that humans tend to have because it doesn't have our same biology. And so that means, it doesn't naturally have things like empathy or compassion, right? We might hypothetically be able to program those in, but they certainly don't arise automatically or naturally. And it's just can think and act much faster than people. This is just sort of by virtue of being a computer program. So for instance, AI systems can read everything that's ever been written. In fact, that's sort of a key element of how they are trained and produced, is by feeding them all of the text that we can get our hands on, whether it's copyrighted or not. And you can run like millions of copies of an AI system in parallel. So once you have a copy that's very smart, you can immediately make tons and tons of copies of it and run all those copies. And moreover, all of those copies can learn from their experiences and share all of that learning. So this can make them learn much faster than humans actually, because again, imagine if we just learned from anybody else's experience immediately. And then finally, science fiction. I think there's a lot of different depictions of AI in science fiction, so it's hard to generalize, but it's often depicted as dangerous. Well, that's true. Yeah. It's can be unpredictable and hard to control. It can be brittle and buggy, as I mentioned, and it could, in fact, suddenly go rogue. It could suddenly, stop behaving nicely, stop obeying commands, and essentially start pursuing its own agenda. This is one of the core technical concerns for people like me who work on so-called AI safety, on trying to figure out technically how we might possibly, hypothetically, hopefully be able to control these things. However, it doesn't need to be like conscious or anything like that in order to go rogue, so there's no magical, mystical thing that needs to happen inside the system. This could just happen as a result of, reasoning in the way that these systems do, and becoming smart enough, or seeing a good opportunity. It's not hyper-logical in the way that older AI systems were. Modern AI, we were way beyond the era of the robotic voice, and there's no does not compute moments with modern AI. It has that kind of fuzzy intelligence that humans do as well. AI can be used to control robotics, but AI doesn't mean the same thing as robotics. So think about these chatbots. They're not robots. They're still AI, and they can still be dangerous. For instance, by manipulating people or controlling other physical systems. And a lot of the times, in sci-fi, AI is sort of defeated at the end by some sort of human ingenuity or something. There's something special about the humans. We're just plucky. We have our intuition or our common sense or something uniquely human that allows us to defeat the robotic voice AI. And that's also not what it's like. AI is the kind of AI we're building doesn't have those kinds of issues and is on track to be smarter than humans in every conceivable way. So we won't have some special ace in the hole. Great. So yeah, why is this a risk to human existence? Well, actually, Alan Turing, who's basically the father of modern computing, already said, AI, we should expect at some point AI will take over because it'll get smarter than us, and then it's just the obvious natural thing that we should expect to happen. Alan Turing also proposed what was long considered the definitive test for if AI systems were human level, which is the Turing test, which is basically if you're talking to the AI system, if you're having a conversation with it through text, can you tell you're talking to an AI system? And with the advent of ChatGPT and these modern large language models 2 years ago, we've passed the Turing test, and the field has barely batted an eye. I want to play you a couple clips from a few other experts,
Now, when you watch software engineers and machine learning experts at work, as they have been on this project, how far along the path to artificial intelligence do you think we are?
The primitive forms of artificial intelligence we already have proved very useful. But I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. Once humans develop artificial intelligence, it would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Humans, who are limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded.
So that's Stephen Hawking explaining, roughly what Alan Turing was concerned about all the way back in the 50s. The idea that once AI gets smarter than people, we will lose control, and it will be able to improve itself and become much smarter than us, or super intelligent, as it's often called. Now, Stephen Hawking is not an AI expert. He's just a really smart guy, and he was, this was one of the main things he was worried about before his death. And he was one of the early
And when
advocates.
you watch software,
he was one of the early advocates for taking this concern seriously. Now, I want to play a couple clips from Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, from earlier in his career before he realized it wasn't smart to say this sort of stuff publicly.
I mean, I think the best case is so unbelievably good that it's hard to. I think it's hard for me to even imagine. And the bad case, and I think this is important to say, is lights out for all of us.
I think AI will probably, most likely, sort of lead to the end of the world. But in the meantime, there will be great companies created with serious machine learning.
Yeah, so, this is not something that the people building this technology are unaware of, right? I think Sam may believe at this point that they've found a way to like harness the beast, and that of course there's some risk, but maybe it's only a couple percentage points, and so it's worth taking for the chance to be sort of a immortal god emperor for the rest of all time or something. But he definitely knows that he's gambling with all of our lives. Oops. So, and this view is a view that is shared by experts. So, despite what I've said before about people not caring that much in the field, there's clearly concern, and the concern is growing. When you survey AI experts, and this is the best survey available, you find that they give a roughly 15 to 20% chance of something as bad as human extinction or permanent and severe disempowerment of the human species occurring due to AI. This is really striking because up until 2023, this was still sort of a taboo to even talk about in the field. So I've been talking to people about this for over 10 years, and it's been tough because it's been really hard to get people to have those conversations. There's an Upton Sinclair quote that it's hard to get somebody to believe something when their job depends on not believing it. And people want to believe that what they're working on is good, or that it doesn't contribute to something like the end of humanity. Now this is Geoffrey Hinton, who I mentioned earlier. He recently won the Nobel Prize for his work inventing deep learning. He also recently quit Google and said that he regretted his life's work because he became so concerned about this risk. So I want to share a clip of him as well.
Are you, at the end of the day, as concerned as you are, optimistic that we can find a way forward that is a good one for humanity?
I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I have friends who think we're more likely than not we'll find a way forward because people are very ingenious, but superintelligence is very ingenious too. So because there's other people who think 50-50 will be exaggerating it, I think it's maybe less than 50-50. I think we've got a better than even chance of surviving this, but it's not like there's only a 1% chance of it taking over. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah. I'm not worried about exaggerating it. I think there's a greater than 50% chance. But yeah, that's, I would say the consensus view, like I showed, is more like 20%, if that's any reassurance.
Are you?
So back in 2023, we made an effort to sort of break this taboo that I mentioned. So I proposed to a number of colleagues that we should make a one-sentence statement that we could ask AI researchers to sign, saying, the risk of extinction is real, basically. And so trying to make it okay for researchers to talk about this amongst ourselves, so people didn't have to worry about their career, essentially. A number of people were worried that they literally would not be able to get hired, even in a university, let alone a company, if they were vocal about their concerns. This is something that I think is actually really important for people to understand, is that, there has been this taboo against talking about it, and this has prevented, this is part of why, as I put it, the AI research community has betrayed the public trust, is because they were scared to admit, even to each other, that they, were worried about this, because it was viewed as like too out there, too kooky, and now we've finally gotten over that because we have leaders of the field who are coming forward with their concerns. And so, this statement was signed not just by Geoffrey Hinton and Yoshua Bengio, it was also signed by the CEOs of the 3 leading AI developers. So they put their name to, this being a serious concern, a global priority, as well as a number of other luminaries in the field, over 100 AI professors. You may have seen this reported on in the media, And one thing that I was upset about is that the media reporting really focused on the tech CEOs, and that led to this sort of counter-narrative that this is some sort of hype effort, that the companies are like saying this in order to like, you know, boost their investment or something. I mean, I won't comment on that as a strategy for getting investors. Seems a little out there to me. But you know, over 100 AI professors, including, you know, people who I know are among really the top people in the field, put their names on this. Yeah, and there's been other public concern, including by governments. Most of this happened in 2023, and we've seen basically backsliding last year in 2024, despite continued rapid progress in the field. Yeah, so this is kind of the argument from experts. I think it's pretty compelling in my mind, you know, when you have this level of expert concern. But I want to tell you a little bit about just like how things might actually go wrong and why. So there's a couple sort of types of threats that I think are worth considering here. One is that companies could just automate all labor once AI gets to be human level, and then people who make a living through their labor will not be able to do that anymore. Now, a lot of people say, oh, okay, but like the government will step in with some sort of UBI or something. We recently wrote a paper explaining why we think that's not what's going to happen in that case. You know, the government is also accountable to people as voters, but once we have AI that can sort of, you know, replace people across the board, it's really unclear if the government is going to give a shit about us, basically. You also might worry that AI can help you build new super weapons, like new biological weapons or other weapons that we haven't really been able to conceive of. Once it reaches a sufficient level of intelligence, it will be able to produce technologies beyond anything that we've been able to imagine. And that could enable terrorists or other actors to, you know, just build something incredibly destructive and unleash it upon the world. And then finally, you know, even if we sort of are able to regulate the companies and sort of make sure that nobody is doing this, you know, as a small terrorist group or something, governments themselves could, and in fact are on track to put AI in charge of their military operations and to build killer robots and to sort of automate the whole process of war. And, you know, so we've had like the flash crash with algorithmic trading back in, I think it was 2007. We could have in the future like flash wars where all of a sudden all of the AI, you know, weapons that we've built up and stockpiled suddenly attack. These are just a few obvious possibilities. I would say, you know, if a super intelligent AI wants to take over, it's going to find a way. So we have to make sure that we don't build a super intelligent AI, or if one is built, that it doesn't want to take over. I'm not optimistic about that latter option. And even if we build just human level AI, so a lot of people now are like, well, let's just build AGI or human level AI. AGI is artificial general intelligence, and stop there. That could still be something that outcompetes us for resources. It's like an invasive species. It's going to be cheaper and faster, and it's going to, you know, take all of our jobs, and then we'll see what happens. And so this is just not at all an acceptable outcome. Technically, where is this risk coming from? So I think it's maybe obvious to people who really, you know, think about what superintelligence means, that it's risky to build it. Technically, there are reasons to worry about this, and a lot of it comes back to this ends justifies the means thing. So if you're trying to win by any means necessary, make as much money or as many points as you can, one obvious thing you want to do as the AI system is make sure that you don't get reprogrammed, because then you won't, maybe then you'll want something else. You certainly don't want to get shut down. So there's just this natural emergent goal to avoid being shut down, even by your designers or creators. More generally, AI systems that are seeking to achieve some goal like that will also have goals to acquire more power and resources. So this take over the world thing is something I mean quite literally. It's not just like, wipe out the humans because we don't like them or we think that, they're for some reason they should be eliminated. You have these stories where like the AI cures cancer by killing everyone or something. There's this drive to take all of the resources you can get your hands on to do a better and better job of achieving your goal. And so this will wipe out, not just humanity. So maybe you don't feel that great about humanity and think it's not that bad if we get wiped out. You're probably not here if that's the case. Some people feel that way. But it'll wipe out all of the natural world as well. And, probably go on to colonize the solar system, the galaxy, wiping out any alien species it encounters. So maybe if the AI shared our goals, this wouldn't be a problem. Unfortunately, we don't know how to program goals into AI systems. We have some basic approaches to doing this. They don't work reliably. We know there are problems with them. We don't know how to fix those problems. Should I be aiming to wrap up kind of soon? Or I'm good? Okay, cool. So I mentioned that the rate of progress has been dramatic. Here's one quick illustration of that. So in 2014, there was this breakthrough where all of a sudden we could generate faces that looked like this, and people were really impressed. Okay? And then 4 years later, so this is illustrating not just the progress in quality, but also the size. So we were generating these tiny, tiny little, blurry faces. 4 years later, we're generating photorealistic images of people that are indistinguishable from real humans. This is just, an example in the visual domain. This ability to generate content is much more general. So we can do this with text, we can do it with audio. This is a very general purpose technique. Deep learning and deep reinforcement learning. Here's another example. So this is, I think, just from 2023. There was a sort of go-to example researchers were using of Will Smith eating noodles to sort of demonstrate the issues that we were still having with video models. And so, I would be impressed when I entered the field for sure to see this, but you can see it's a little bit off. A year later, we have basically perfect video generation. So, if you were Will Smith, maybe you should be worried about your job too. This is an animated one. And we are starting to see labor impacts, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. But tech companies are slowing down hiring. They're firing people. They're replacing people with AI. Programming and coding is being massively accelerated and replaced with AI. I talked to some people 2 days ago who were saying enrollment in computer science is down at their university because the young people realize that they won't be able to get a job writing code anymore. Again, that's because these AI systems have sort of learned to generate code, and they're learning to generate basically anything. So anything that you as a human can do on a computer, this is like the goal this year for these AI companies is to build a drop-in replacement remote worker that can do anything that you can do on a computer, and then take all those jobs. So AI is going to make, once we reach AGI, human level AI, people will be completely unemployable. There won't be programming jobs, there won't be any kind of jobs, because it will be able to do literally anything a human can do. And that is the goal for these companies, is to build that and then to build the superhuman systems. My friends and my students are already planning around this. They're asking, what's going to happen, in a couple years when I can't get a job doing research anymore, or doing coding anymore? Maybe I should figure out, move to a country that I think has the best social safety net, because there's some chance that they will actually, try and distribute the wealth. Unfortunately, the country that is going to have the most AI technology right now looks like the US, so there's kind of this trade-off of like, the US is going to have all the AI wealth, but like maybe Canada would have a better social safety net, or Europe. This is literally like a conversation I had with my friend a couple months ago, is their life planning for the next couple of years based on this. Economic models, some have been done on this problem and showing how wages could collapse in 20 years or 5 years based on the speed of AI takeoff. Of course, once you get to AGI, AI that is human level across the board, that'll probably happen pretty quickly. So that's the situation with jobs. This is one of the most technical plots, but the reason I put it in here is because it shows that we are, exceeding human level performance on many of the tasks or many of the benchmarks that we use in the field to measure progress. But more importantly, we are struggling to come up with new benchmarks that don't immediately get saturated. So over here, you see, in recent years, people have developed brand new benchmarks that are considered really hard because AI can't do them at all. And then within a year, they're approaching human level. I think for some of these, they've recently crossed that line. One sort of famous example that was created by one of the sort of AI skeptics is called the ARC AGI prize test. So this is meant to be a test for AGI, for is this thing human level? So similarly to the Turing test, right? It was sort of, well, maybe that didn't, wasn't a good measurement, so here's a new one. Just last year, we saw these tasks that AI literally couldn't do anything at. They're now superhuman. And, there's been a lot of people saying, oh, it looks like progress is like relatively slow and continuous, and so we're going to have time to adapt as a society as AI gets better and better. And this is just one example of how dramatically wrong that may be, and I expect it to be. So this question of how long do we have until AGI and ASI, I think again it's worth hearing what Sam Altman has to say about this, whether or not you believe him.
What are you excited about in 2025? What's to come?
AGI?
Yeah.
Excited for that.
So that's this year.
In the essay, you actually say a really big thing, which is ASI, superintelligence, is actually thousands of days away.
Maybe. I mean, that's our hope,
Yeah.
our guess, whatever. But that's a very wild statement.
Yeah. Tell us about it. I mean, that's big. That is really big.
I can see a path where the work we are doing just keeps compounding, and the rate of progress we've made over the last 3 years continues for the next 3 or 6 or 9 or whatever. 9 years would be like 3,500 days or whatever. If we can keep this rate of improvement or even increase it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just get really upset when I see these interviews, and there's stuff like this coming out just all the time. It's just all over my social media and everything is more conversations like this with people really kind of jovially, smugly forecasting these events, and I don't really know what to say about it. I just find it really hard to watch.
What are you excited about?
Yeah, so where's this all headed? So again, the sort of the word on the street, the conversations that people are having at these companies and within the field that I'm in, people who are worried about this, is that we're going to automate all programming. So right now it's just used as an assistant and doing a lot of programming, but it's going to be like all the programming, including all the research and development R&D for AI within a few years. So that's kind of like the forecast, the track. And the future is hard to predict. Maybe this is going to take like 5 years or a decade or something. I think it's going to take less than 5 years. And that's what most of my colleagues believe these days as well. And that means humans are going to be completely taken out of the loop for coding. So there's just going to be code that's being produced by the AI, and we're just going to run it wherever we want to use code to run any of our systems, like our financial system or like our companies, our social media, and then humans are going to be taken out of the loop everywhere. And this process where AI automates AI research is sort of a special case of this phenomenon of recursive self-improvement, where the AI makes a better AI, makes a better AI, makes a better AI. And this is something that people in the AI safety community, like me, people who are worried about this, have been talking about, again, for a decade or two. And this has mostly been treated as like, such a preposterous, far off like thing to imagine, nothing to worry about. And now it's just taken for granted as like sort of the next thing that we're going to do in the field. Just as a like visceral example of sort of where things are at. This is Andrej Karpathy, one of the most sort of famous AI researchers, and he's describing this kind of coding called vibe coding, where you fully give into the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that code even exists. And this is because the LLMs are getting so good at writing code, and you can now talk to them, so you don't even need to touch the keyboard. They can just understand your speech, and you just you accept always. You don't read the diffs anymore. In other words, whatever the AI says, you just do it. You don't even bother trying to understand it. If there's an error message, you just copy paste it back in, and usually that fixes it, or at least appears to fix it. The code grows beyond my comprehension. It's not really coding. You just see stuff, say stuff, run stuff, copy paste, and it mostly works. And this is like increasingly common practice. So this is where we're at. And finally, as I mentioned, AI is being used in the military, and there's a lot of excitement about that among certain crowds of people who stand to make money off of it. Maybe some people in the government who think that this is good for some reason. OpenAI, like most companies up until recently, was vehemently denying that they would ever work on weapons to kill people. And now they've realized they need more money in order to keep scaling things up and making the AI more powerful. And so what are they doing? They're trying to get all of that military money, trying to get in with the defense departments to build the killer robots. So again, something that I think people in the field assumed that, like researchers, academics, assumed that this would never happen because we didn't want it to. And I've always been like, no, this is kind of where this is headed. We need to do something. So
totally awesome.
Here's just a couple,
look at this.
examples of
released this video of
some promotional videos of robots with weapons, or just demonstrating the kind of capabilities that people are building and promoting for military applications. I have taken a lot of time, and I'm really grateful for your attention. Just to recap, what I said at the beginning, AI companies are building this stuff. They're building it right now, especially in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, right here. I know some of the people working at these companies. They're my former colleagues. Nobody knows how these things work. Pretty much everyone in the know acknowledges that this might lead to the death of everybody who is currently alive. And the concerns that have been raised are just not being attended to. So, I've tried repeatedly sort of working within the system to get attention to this problem and to get people to wake up and say, hey, maybe we should stop. Hey, this really needs to stop. And, this could all happen, just to make it real, this could happen before the next election. This could happen before your kids grow up, or before you get to have kids, before the next album from your favorite musician comes out, the one you've been waiting for, before your next big vacation or your next class reunion, and definitely before the rest of the world wakes up and figures out what's going on and leaps into action. So yeah, I think that's where you guys come in, and movements like this. So I'm really excited. I'm really proud and inspired to see all you guys here today. I think we need to do something about this. It's urgent, and I've been really hoping that people would wake up to this and would start doing something, because I think it's really something that everybody has a right to know, and everybody has a right to be outraged, and everyone needs to work to stop this. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to the organizers.
All right, well, thank you very much, David. That was awesome. If it's going to kill us all, what the hell do we do about it? That's the question. And the very simple answer is get in the street and protest. Just a little intro. My name's Sam Kirchner. started protesting to stop AI roughly a year ago. I've been arrested for blocking the gates of OpenAI a couple of times. My friends in this group have also been arrested and have spent days in jail preventing the deaths of people we love. And we're frankly terrified. You know, David's telling you that this could be a year or two until everyone dies and or all of our jobs are taken, and we have to do everything now to stop it. And I know it might sound like that's an impossible task, but there's some data here that we're going to go over that shows that that's not as hopeless as it may seem. We actually can stop it if we just get in the street. So without further ado, let's get into it. So yeah, Stop AI, just as a definition, if you will, is we're a non-violent civil resistance organization working to permanently ban the development of smarter than human AI, and you just learned the more technical sort of definition for that. It's artificial general intelligence, or AGI, which can lead to artificial superintelligence, or ASI. And there's just no way you can prove that that smarter than human system will stay safe forever. So that's why we need to permanently ban it, because an ant can't control a human, right? Like if we're the ants and the superintelligence is the humans in that analogy, there's nothing an ant can do to stop a human from doing whatever they want. And I know there might be a whole lot of technical arguments that you can get into for alignment and all this crap, but like at the end of the day, that doesn't make sense. An ant controlling a human, never gonna happen. All right, so policy demands for Stop AI. Like I said, we want to permanently ban the development of artificial general intelligence, and how you do that is a little bit complicated. You can get into sort of compute caps, how you measure compute for AI systems that we don't really have to get into right now. Potentially banning systems more powerful than ChatGPT-4 if it can do potentially recursive self-improvement, which, like what David was talking about, could lead to ASI if it can do AI autonomous research and development. We want to sort of track computer hardware. So the supply chains to go build these very powerful AI systems are actually very easy to track. Like there's a very few number of companies building very powerful chips to go power these AI systems. And we can sort of track them just like we track the supplies to build nuclear weapons. And we need to do a better job of demanding that government does that. One thing we haven't really talked about tonight is mass job loss and the job loss problem. Some of you may know OpenAI is training their models, the very powerful models, with basically stolen data. They stole it from artists, they stole it from writers, and they're plugging it into their AI models, and that's what's making their AI really great. And it's just, you know, you can take the data from, like, I don't know, J.K. Rowling's vast novel base and go train an AI on it, and it spits out something that's pretty much just exactly like Harry Potter. And they're not paying licenses on that data, and for that reason, artists are rightly so pissed. And that's just one part of the job problem here. OpenAI on their website defines AGI, artificial general intelligence, as a system that's more technically a system that's more generally intelligent and economically productive than most humans, but they really mean all humans. And if that's the case, there's not really going to be any jobs left. So with AGI, mass job loss, but even with sub-AGI, you could have a lot of jobs being taken by very specific narrow AI tools. And if it's the case that the majority of people in a profession are not okay with a AI tool being used, then they should have the right to vote for that tool to be eliminated. Like, we should have mass union consensus on whether we want to use these AI tools or not. And yeah, protect human jobs, basically. And we basically need a federal agency that's solely devoted to protecting the public from the harms of AI. And right now, there's a similar agency, but the issue is Sam Altman sits on the board of that agency. So it doesn't really make sense to have these agencies to protect us if the AI CEOs are on the boards. And then there's this idea called a citizens' assembly, which is basically saying we're trying to put more democratic control. We're trying to basically make government more democratic. Because right now, AI potentially killing us all is a symptom of sort of democracy failing. Because if you asked everyone in this room, hey, do you want to go build something that could kill us all? The answer would probably be no, right? Like, show of hands, who wants to build something that's going to kill us all? Okay, great. Yeah. So we need sort of systems that make democracy more robust, and citizens assembly is just one way you could do that. It's sort of a hypothetical idea where you take sort of a random sortition from society, and then you give them control within government, and there's like less issues with lobbying than if you have sort of termed representatives. And it might be a hybrid system. We're not saying like we need to just destroy the U.S. government or rework everything. We're just mostly worried about banning AGI, and how we do that is a work in progress. Okay, so some statistics to make you sort of feel happy, if you will, that this isn't just hopeless. There's this study done by this woman named Erica Chenoweth, and she studied revolutions in the global south over the past 100 years. And she found that if you can engage 3.5% of a country's population in active peaceful protest, you have basically you're guaranteed to achieve your high-level political demand or overthrow an autocratic government. And that was done with nonviolence. And the really encouraging thing about that study was she found that 50% of the time between the inception of the revolution and achieving the ban, it was done in like less than a year. So if superintelligence is going to be here in a year or two, or if AGI is going to be here in a year or two, we can actually stop it with nonviolent resistance. That is possible. And this study also showed that using nonviolent resistance is twice as effective than using violence to combat autocracy, or, governments, or to achieve any sort of political demand. So that's why we're not picking up arms right now, because we actually believe that the data supports using the nonviolent approach. And let's see, a very encouraging poll was done by this group called AI Policy Institute, or AIPI, back in 2023, where they showed that 63% of Americans are in favor of regulators permanently banning AI superintelligence, or actually actively preventing AI superintelligence. So the opinion that we just shouldn't build something smarter than all of us is a popular one. And no one in this city or in the sort of Bay Area knows better than us that people on the street just do not want this thing. They're like, yeah, they're trying to build Terminator. It's nuts. And it's a pretty common sense opinion that we just should not build that thing. An interesting example of sort of nonviolent resistance working in Western countries in recent years is a group called Just Stop Oil over in the UK. They protest climate change, and they use roadblocks and barricade company entrances just like we do. And they just achieved their first high-level political demand in the UK Parliament with way less than 1% of the UK population engaging in nonviolent resistance. So you don't have to get to 3.5% to actually enact change. Like, we don't have to get to 11 million people in the US protesting to actually stop this. Like, there was another group called Extinction Rebellion in the Netherlands, where they had 9,000 people sit in the street for a week. And at the end of that week, the government was just like, we can't police this. And they agreed to the demands. So if we all get in the street, we can actually stop this. Just another example of sort of mass organizing being very effective. There was a threat of the Eastern Seaboard being shut down last year by a longshoreman strike. So that's sort of the thing that we need to do. Like, there's a lot of people in AI safety saying like, oh, we can just fix this with governance work, and we don't need to get in the street. That's fundamentally wrong, because if you don't have a movement behind you, you do not have a bargaining chip to go talk to these representatives in government. You need to have a movement to threaten their job and make them fear for their job. If you don't have the movement, then you don't have the bargaining chip to go shut down the economy. So if you can shut down the economy non-violently, then you can force governments to listen to you. So here's some pictures of us blocking the gates of OpenAI. We've mostly just targeted OpenAI because they're the big baddies. And this was our last protest. What was this? Last month. And yeah, a couple weeks ago actually, sorry.
January 22nd.
Thank you, Wynn. Yes. This is Wynn right here. Stand up, Wynn, if you want, but or say hello. Okay. Yeah, all right. So a couple of people, yeah, they brave souls, right? Sat down in front of the doors of the company that's going to kill everyone and got arrested for it. This is what needs to happen. This is how we stop it. So with that, I'd really like to ask everyone here to actually get involved. This is not just a talk for you to come learn about how we could all die and then go home and scroll on TikTok. You need to do something. You cannot just you cannot just take in this information and do nothing. You have to do something. People that you love are going to die. People that I love are going to die. I'm begging you, please, like, help. We need everyone to get involved now. So if you're willing to, flyering is how we basically met all of you. It's very easy. It takes very little effort, and it's, I mean, so raise your hand here if you're potentially willing to flyer and help grow the organization to stop the development of AI. Great, awesome. And we have registration forms, and for those who raise your hand, we'd love it if you could get a registration form before you leave and give us your name and phone number or email. All right, if you're willing to come to a legal protest, so this basically just means holding a sign, not getting arrested, just showing up to show the numbers at a legal protest. Who's willing to come to a legal protest? Awesome, fantastic. Thank you. And who here would be potentially interested in learning more about nonviolent civil resistance? Great, all right, we'll go. And then finally, we have a lot of sort of tasks that are sort of behind the scenes that we would love more help with. I mean, we work 18-hour days, we wake up, do this, go to bed. So if you guys have time to volunteer, we'd really love your help. And that's sort of more about like creating media, lots of sort of back-end things like this. And here's our next protest. So I'd really, really love it if you guys could RSVP, scan the QR code. If you don't trust the QR code, you can go to the website, it's stopai.info, and it's on the events page, and you can RSVP that way. But really, we gotta do something now. We have very little time, we have to act. So this is the next protest, it's gonna be at OpenAI, it's gonna be April 18th. The time is actually not on there, it's gonna be 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. And that's at OpenAI's office in San Francisco in the dog patch, sort of right by the Warrior Stadium. So yeah, let's get out there, do something, and stop AI. So thank you, everyone.
Take any questions?
Yes, we were about to do that
Okay.
after Derek goes.
Sorry.
Quick, I'm going to make this quick. I'm going to make the last one back. Okay, there we go. We've already went over quite a few things. We haven't went over enough the fact the United States is actively working towards artificial general intelligence. This was announced in the first month of the Trump administration. They're spending $500 billion on a project in Texas to create an AI smarter than all of humanity. China responded with their own project, $140 billion equal to 1 trillion Chinese yuan. They're trying to make their own AGI. The fact is, see, I've spoken to so many people who believe that they don't have to do anything. They think that wealthy people, powerful people, smart people are going to do something. David Krueger, Professor Krueger, has spoken about how smart people have failed to do anything, how smart people have failed to even get the public to do anything. The rich, the powerful, the smart are not fixing this. That's what the plot of practically every single fictional media about artificial intelligence goes off on. It's governments act. No, they're not acting right now. The leaders who we have elected, the leaders who we have not elected, are bringing us towards extinction. They're bringing us towards at least the worst economic situation ever. We We cannot rely on them, and they are failing at their jobs. You see, we should not be coming to them to solve our problems. They should be coming to us. We need to do something. I'd like everyone here to look to your left, look to your right. Ask yourselves, really, the only type of people who can really do something about this is the type of people in this room. The type of people who go to meetings in the past, similar to this one. And I have to say, this is the biggest one we've ever had. This isn't even that many people. We earlier had a protest. It was only about 50 people. This is basically a doubling event right now if we have everybody in this room goes to the next one. My point is that a lot of people here are going to say, I don't have to do anything, or I don't want to do anything, or I can't do anything. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what all these people do. Well, let's think about this. If you believe that it's inevitable that AGI is going to happen, that this massive depression is going to happen, that everybody is going to be dead in several years, ask yourself, why are you paying your mortgage? Why are you going to college? Why are you spending hours studying, going to work, doing boring things, waking up in the morning? Why are you taking care of your children? What are your children going to be doing? Many older people, what are your children, your adult children, grandchildren going to be doing in 20 years if they're going to be dead? Really, if this is inevitable, why get up in the morning? Why get up tomorrow morning? You don't see the people in this room. You don't see the people outside. You don't actually believe that there are human beings outside of this room anywhere on this planet, if you think this is inevitable. You don't believe that there are any human beings left. All you see are walking corpses. I'm asking you to do something. I have done something. You have to do something. I have to do something. I have spent hundreds of hours tabling, flyering, just going up to people, talking to them, talking to my friends and family, walking down streets, knocking on doors, talking to people at the door, handing the flyers, hanging little signs on doors and putting stuff on cars. I've even spent 5 days in jail. It was on a Saturday. I got in there on a Saturday, and they kept me in there for 3 business days, the legal limit, 72 business hours. And all I did was non-violently sit in front of the door until the police had to arrest me and take me in the car, take me to jail. 5 days, gone. I would do it again. I'd do it again. But I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not asking you to do that. I am asking you to do something, anything at all. Everyone can do something.
All right, that was awesome, Derek. Thanks.
One last thing. If you can flyer, if you can talk to people about this, please. No one else is going to do it. Everyone depends on it. Your children depend on it. Future depends on it. All right?
100%. Okay, any questions? I know that's a lot.
Are you going to pass the hat?
The hat.
Don't you want donations?
Oh, yeah, donations. All right, yeah. Well, we have on the website, if you go to stopai.info, there's a donate page. You can donate on there.
We give AI our information.
That's okay. If you got cash, we can pass something around.
Sure.
All right.
Old school.
Yeah.
I'm old.
Well, we got a bucket back there. We'll repurpose the Madeline bucket back there for donations. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your guys' honesty and vulnerability. I think it's very powerful. I'm on board 100%, but why stop at AI? You know, I mean, I think AI is very clearly, in some ways, it's easier to see that it affects everyone when we talk about extinction, but these harmful effects from technology, maybe not AI specifically, but just technology, social media, screens, all these effects, people dying, people's jobs being lost, it's already happening now. Why stop at AI? Why don't we address all, a more broad harm of technology?
Sure, yeah. So social media, calculators, every other technology, you can say they're bad. They're not going to cause human extinction, right? That's the difference. If you build something that's general purpose and it's smarter than humans across all technical domains, then it could lead to superintelligence, and that could be the new most intelligent species on the planet. And that system could want something that would lead to our extinction in an inadvertent way, similar to how we've caused the extinction of many less intelligent species here on Earth. So we can, a sort of concrete way I like to describe that playing out is like, if a superintelligent agent, well, first of all, intelligence is just an agent with an end goal. And if a superintelligent agent had an end goal of performing some computational task and allocating more computational resources to perform that task, then it might have a sub-goal to that end goal of covering the entire Earth in data centers. And that would be very bad for us as a species and every other species here on Earth because they rely on the biosphere. So calculators aren't going to do that. Social media is not going to do that. Yeah, they suck sometimes, but primarily we're just worried about the development of superhuman AI systems. And importantly, I don't know if we really touched on this, but we're not no AI, we're stop AI. So there's a lot of AI we're actually okay with for medical advancements and whatnot that's under the threshold of AGI. And you can learn more about that on the website. So,
Not taking jobs.
yeah. Humans over AI in terms of job loss. So, any other questions? Yep.
So you're saying it should be called Stop AGI?
Exactly.
Stop AI.
Yeah. We were actually using the name No AGI before, but people would come up to me on the street and be like, "What the fuck is Aggie?" And if you type in AGI on Google, the first 100 results are adjusted gross income. So, for the purpose of mobilizing the public to stop AGI, you need to use a name that's very easy for people to grasp and get mobilized quickly. And we've seen this on the street. We have these wonderful shirts, and people come up to us and they just chant "Stop AI, stop AI." You're not going to get that with a name like No AGI. It's not going to be able to kind of have the very quick effect that we're hoping for to stop this in a short period of time. Any other questions? Yeah, Ira.
What about the international element?
Oh yes, we didn't touch on this at all.
The simple fact that people say, well, yeah, we can stop it here, but Russia and China are still going to do it.
Yeah, so that's huge, and that's the argument that most experts say it's just impossible to stop this, because if you stop it here in the US, then it's just going to go to China, Russia, wherever. I'm not saying this is going to be an easy task, and in fact, it might be an impossible task. But if it's going to kill us all, we might as well go out fighting. But there's actually ways you can stop it. If you stop it in the US, that's going to be a very costly signal. And China will hopefully reciprocate with a signal of similar value.
Well, didn't the speaker say that the technology is generally sourced in a limited number of places? Isn't that the place to fight it? From the source of the technology that China and Russia are also using?
Well, okay, yeah.
May I answer?
Sure.
Sorry. I have a very good answer to this question. No dictator on the planet will ever want to have their power usurped by an artificial intelligence. No dictator on the planet is seriously going to want to have an AGI to exist, for an ASI to exist, because they're going to lose some of their own power. It's a matter of common sense that you cannot predict the actions of something much smarter than yourself. It's a matter of common sense you cannot control something much, much smarter than yourself.
Donald Trump doesn't believe there is such a thing.
That's right. But it's also a matter of greed. Not just common sense, but it's a matter of greed, because there is still potential for the artificial intelligence to control some of their land, some of their power. They don't want to partition any amount of their power. That is the way that dictators think. So maybe it can't, maybe it won't be smarter than them, but they don't want the risk of this fifth column, this partitioning.
And China is also made up of people, and if we were able to educate their massive number of citizens that this could actually kill us all very soon, they would probably revolt. And our job is just to educate them sort of fairly and quickly on that threat, so that something exactly like what we're trying to do here happens there, and that the people resist the development of this thing that's going to kill us all. That's the hope.
David has something to say.
Yeah, I think this is in fact a really important point, and it is a really common objection. I think if the governments become seriously worried about this or become motivated to act, I think they will be able to find ways to discuss this and coordinate and make sure that nobody is building AI or building AGI. And there's a lot of people thinking right now on the research side about like what exactly that might look like, hoping that we will get a wake-up call, we will get the political will, and putting in place the pieces that we would need if and when that happens.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be similar to nuclear weapons treaties?
Yeah, it's very similar. Nuclear weapons treaties are like a great example, but people do renege on them, or countries renege on them. So the problem that the problem with AGI and superintelligence is that it could be much worse than nuclear weapons, and that if nuclear weapons get out of hand, it's just human actors acting against other human actors. Whereas if superintelligence gets out of hand, it's basically like an ant acting against a human actor. There's no reining that system in. If nukes get out of hand, we can probably rein them in. If superintelligence gets out of hand, you're cooked.
But my point being, a way of controlling it internationally would be the same as nuclear weapons treaties.
Yeah. So it's one important. I just wanted to add one important disanalogy with nuclear weapons is that nobody has built one yet. So we're on track to build it, but we haven't built it yet, and so there's still a chance to just not go there. And I think that does change the situation internationally. I like to say when Iran was moving towards building a nuclear weapon, that was treated as like a really big deal internationally. But imagine if they were going to be the only ones, like what the response would have been. So I think that's the kind of response we can imagine governments having to another government trying to build AGI or superintelligence once governments wake up to this problem, or once there's the political will forcing them to take it seriously.
Would you know if AGI were to be developing? Would it not serve governments to keep it a secret?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's being developed by companies in the private sector. There is concern that they might develop it and not release it for profit in the way that they have done with existing models, and instead use it to try and build, an even more powerful model quickly that they could then use to sort of control the world. And right now there's no guarantee that we will know if that's happening, because we lack the basic oversight that the government has over other industries with AI. So we've talked about, or I guess Sam has talked about some proposals for policy here, and I think that's the sort of thing that's really needed. But I think it's also important to just notice that right now there's basically no regulation, and so we don't even get to know what these companies are doing. They're grading their own homework. Like, this is the extent. So this is kind of why I got frustrated when I was working in government, is because the policy proposals that were being advanced and were getting traction were just clearly insufficient and inadequate. It was things like, let's make sure that the companies run some tests on their models that might tell us if they're dangerous, but we also know that the tests don't really work. And it's not the government's going to run those tests. It's not even that. It's not that the tests can actually tell us if the model is safe. It's just like, we should probably ask the people making the models to like grade their own homework a bit and like tell us if the thing is like showing very clear and evident signs that it's about to kill everyone. Now, that's not necessarily, you know, something we can expect. You know, an AI system might have that goal and that intention and hide it until it has the power necessary to carry out that plan. This is a, you know, basic concern that has been discussed, you know, in AI safety for decades. And so, you know, these policies are just really, really weak, and that's kind of like what's on the table right now in terms of most of the regulations. So even when you hear about AI regulation, if you hear about, you know, regulations being passed, you need to know that it's not sufficient, it's not adequate. Nothing that has been proposed in policy right now is going anywhere near far enough. So don't be placated. Yeah, go for it.
If someone walked by and heard you're going to kill everyone out of context, they might think you're crazy. Yet, in Gaza recently, they tried to kill everyone.
Thank you.
And I wonder, what was the role of AI in the genocide in Gaza?
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a program that the Israeli government developed called Project Lavender, where they were using AI to generate targets in Gaza. And there was this thing, it's sort of like a creativity slider, where if they weren't getting enough targets every day, they would slide it into giving them more targets, and they allowed women, you know, into that target parameter. And yeah, it's crazy. And there's we didn't have a video of it on here, but there's this thing called slaughterbots. It's the idea that, you know, you'd have this autonomous drone swarm with facial recognition, and it could go identify a target, and then with an explosive ordnance on the bottom, go eliminate that target. And, you know, that's almost, there's been rumors of demos for something like that being used in Ukraine, but if something like that were to be developed by the Israeli government, the fight right now is already so one-sided technologically, and then you add that to it, and it's just horrifying. So, yeah.
Daddy's home too. Where they control like the whole family when Daddy gets home. Where's Daddy?
Yeah.
It's actually not just Lavender, there's 3 other AIs.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wynn knows all about it. If you're curious about the Gaza problem, go talk to Wynn.
Don't forget the pages.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You had your hand up there.
David, earlier you mentioned that you were talking about the plans with colleagues and friends for the future. Can you say a bit more about that, including what major one should study these days, given AGI or not, and also why do you think UBI will work?
Yeah. So a bit more about that is I think I already just said that, you know, my students and colleagues are like making plans based around this, and you know, I talked about that. In terms of what major, I mean, I think it's, you know, does it matter? I'm not sure it matters. I think if you can do like a really good job and get through your degree really fast and try and get some power somehow, like in government or something, maybe it's worth it. But honestly, I think, you know, part of why I'm here is because I've become frustrated with all of the attempts that I and others have made to do something about this, just kind of not getting very far. So yeah, I'm always encouraging people who care about this problem to think outside the box, think about what you can do that's different than, you know, what everyone else is already doing, what everyone has already tried. And I think there's a lot of smart people who have spent a lot of time in school, you know, trying to figure out how to solve this problem. The other question was, why won't UBI work? I'll say my answer, and I'll let Sam say something as well. Maybe I think we have universal basic income. So this is the idea that like everyone will be out of work, but the government will, you know, provide some sort of basic handouts that we can all still survive.
Nope.
People need to buy the products too.
They don't care about us.
Yeah, so I think this isn't going to work. We did this paper I mentioned on gradual disempowerment recently that has more arguments about that. I think the main argument I have is like, if you don't have a job, you don't have economic power, and I think you also probably don't have political power shortly after that. And so UBI is maybe something that governments would use to placate people in the short term, but won't work in the long term. This is also imagining that we're going to get to like some sort of AGI that all it does is replaces people's jobs, and we don't keep pushing on to superintelligence, which is something that we're very likely to lose control of. And then it won't just be like, unemployment, it'll literally be like the world is being reshaped by an alien species that has its own goal and doesn't care at all about our lives, basically.
Well, right now it looks like we still have jobs that are not replaceable by AI. But when do we have the smart jobs, the nanotechnology, the robots on the street replacing all the jobs?
That's basically AGI, artificial general intelligence, the point where AI is better than all human experts across all technical domains. And that leading to superintelligence. Some people think, oh, my job's never going to get replaced because I'm a physical therapist or whatever. Like, yeah, that job's going to be kind of hard to replace now, but robots are getting exponentially more nimble. And if you have this superintelligence system, the very simple argument, which seems far-fetched, but is basically, if you imagine us as superintelligent compared to chickens or ants, there's no job a chicken or ant can do that humans cannot do. So it's the ability to generalize that allows you to go, an AI to go do every job.
I guess, yeah, so timelines are uncertain. We can't predict the future, but it's becoming more and more like clear to people that this could happen, in a matter of a few years. And there's a question of once the technology exists, how quickly will it be adopted? I personally think that we might get to superintelligence so quickly after we get to AGI that we won't see total unemployment. We will see human extinction first.
How specifically do you see that unfolding, say, if it happens within 5 years?
They put it in
so
presentation.
Yeah, so I mentioned a few examples. I mean, I think war, developments of new destructive technologies, or the complete destruction of the environment are all likely ways that this can occur. So AI systems, if they really, become powerful enough to take over the world and to pursue their goal, they're going to use everything that they can get their hands on to become more powerful, to improve themselves further, and in furtherance of whatever goal they have, which is probably going to be something that's very alien and incomprehensible to us, because again, there's just this giant, like trillions of random numbers that we've sort of, tried to massage into doing something that sort of looks like what we want. And yeah, so I think this can look like developing radical new technologies. It can look like, people sort of handing off power more and more to AI companies, and more of our investments going into building bigger and bigger data centers, even at the cost of human lives, at the cost of environmental destruction. And so if you just extrapolate that to the fullest extent, and you also imagine people becoming unemployed and not having the basic means to survive, and meanwhile the natural environment is being completely destroyed, so that we can't survive on our own. This is one way that can happen. I think there's a question, there's like a genuine question of like, if and when you have a super intelligent AI that takes over the world, like what is it going to do? And it's hard to predict because this thing is so much smarter than us. It might look around and be like, oh, these humans pose like no threat to me at this point because I have secured my own manufacturing supply chain. I have these highly advanced robots that are like mining the materials I need, that are generating the energy I need, that are building more robots. And if humans try and interfere, like there's nothing they can do. I can just protect those facilities and kill any humans that come near. I've taken over the military. I've disabled, whatever weapons the humans had. Does it then need to wipe out all humans immediately? I mean, it doesn't need to in the same way that we don't need to wipe out ants, or we don't need to wipe out other species. But in the same way that we destroy the environments of other species in order to achieve our goals, the AI would, I think, predictably do that. So it may or may not look around and see humans as an enemy that needs to be eliminated, and so that can happen quickly, or it can happen more gradually and slowly as it just reshapes the world, making it uninhabitable. and protecting itself from any attempt that we have of interfering with its operations. So like right now, people often, when I talk to people about this, especially people in the field, they're often like, well, we can just shut it off, we can just unplug it. That won't be the case anymore, because there will be a fully self-sustaining ecosystem of AI systems, including the physical hardware, the robots, the factories, all of this being run by AI and producing more of itself. So if you imagine everything that humans do right now to build AI and to build robots and to build machines, that can all be done by AI systems. The economic, logic says that companies will replace humans with AI systems in every part of this supply chain, in every part of the pipeline. And then it will be a fully functioning, economy and society with no human involvement. Humans will be completely out of the loop. At that point, humans might be like, oh no, look at all this stuff that's happening that we don't want, that we don't like. Let's try and interfere and stop it. And it'll probably be too late at that point.
Sam, I was wondering how you differ from Pause AI. And David, I was wondering, you said your PDUM was above 50%. I was just curious what it is.
You want to say your PDUM first? Because I can go on and on about Pause AI. So above 50%. Yeah, so the fundamental difference between us and Pause AI is saying, well, superintelligence currently is being built unsafely, but eventually it could be built safely. We're saying there's no way you can build that superintelligent system safely ever, because you can't have experimental evidence that it will stay safe forever. That's not possible. And that would be, in my mind, the only acceptable time when it would be acceptable to build it, is if you had experimental evidence showing indefinite safety, and it's just not possible. The other main difference is we do civil disobedience. They just hold signs. So, yeah.
I was wondering whether, great presentation, actually it's going to be available online.
Yes, we're going to put it on the Learn page. It's going to be, yeah.
Just a follow-up question. I was wondering whether you guys could comment on, I don't know, this conversations that's been happening among AI critics about the appropriate ways to, the best kind of strategies for engaging in AI critique. There are people who are critical of AI but say that really what we should be doing is focusing on present-day AI harms, many of which you are listing, like the fact that it's leading to unemployment in the industry, but there's lots of others too that I think many of you also list, this environmental imprint, the fact that it's corrupting higher education. Maybe that one sounds trivial to lots of people.
No, absolutely.
But so, and that these critics who are talking about let's focus on present-day AI harms. Sometimes we say if we talk about the future, and these things do seem that these PDUM things do seem real, they're worrisome, but sometimes people talk about them as sort of wishful worrying. That let's worry about this future that may happen, looks possible,
and it distracts from the current ones. Yeah, it's an argument we hear a lot, and we're trying to say this presentation was mostly on the existential threat, and us all dying from extinction. But we're not trying to dissuade or discredit anyone's concern if their concern is primarily about current harms. If you have a bone to pick with AI, we want to help you, and simple as that. We need to do a better job actually of working on talking about the present day harms in this presentation, but it's a work in progress. So, yeah, I think it's really unfortunate the way this has played out. I think there's a sense in which in the past, I think this conflict of narratives has actually helped both sets of concerns get some attention in the media, but now, it starts to feel more like a divide and conquer tactic by those who are opposed to any sort of AI regulation, and I think really, these different groups ought to just be working on the same side. I don't see that there's a big conflict strategically between emphasizing some of the harms and other harms. I think a lot of the times when people say things like that, who are well-intentioned, they just don't believe that we're going to get AGI anytime soon, or in some cases they don't believe it'll ever happen. They believe it's impossible, or that there's something about the technology we're building that won't get us there. And I just don't see any basis for being confident in those things. My personal belief is that this is very likely to happen very soon, so it is like an imminent threat. It's not like some long-term future thing that, only my grandkids will have to worry about. That's what I thought before I heard about deep learning. And since then, all the progress we've seen has really supported my view that this is quite likely going to happen, very soon. And so if people don't think that that's the case, I think it's understandable that they would think that these other issues are more important and that this is a distraction. But I like to talk to people who have that view about, why they have that view that this is clearly not going to happen, because I think there's a lot of signs pointing the other way at this point, and I think it's pretty irresponsible to not, to just say with confidence that, oh, we just clearly aren't anywhere near AGI. I think, it's pretty clear to me that we are quite near, or that we're likely quite near. And I like to, try and dig in on those conversations and convince people of this. But the future is hard to predict. People have different views. I wish that we could all work together, and I think it's important that we do whenever possible.
Is it Peter Thiel that developed that lavender? And isn't that where J.D. Vance was working? Which is kind of scary, because that means, it's kind of like close to time.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on Peter Thiel or J.D. Vance, but there's a lot of VCs out there that are funding stuff they shouldn't fund.
So, what role do you think that capitalism has in the control of AI?
Great question.
I think, capitalism is one system, and I think the problems that are leading to the development of AI, the unchecked development of AI, are fundamentally, about power. And I think, in any system, you have similar issues of concentration of power and collective decision making. And I just don't believe that we have found like a general purpose solution, like an alternative system that would by itself, like if we were to transition away from capitalism towards like some other form of organization, like communism or whatever, I don't think that would like solve the problem immediately, by itself or anything like that. I think, there are some underlying failures here in terms of, democratic decision making or social structures reflecting the will of the people in an appropriate way. But we've seen similar pathologies, certainly in communist countries. And so, I think there's an interesting and important problem that I hope we have more time to solve about how to improve our social organization so that problems like this don't keep coming up. But for now, I think, I'm more focused on just what can we do about this problem right now, because I don't think we have time for like the kind of underlying social change that might, help us solve problems like this going forward, and other, global problems. I think it's a really important project, but yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on the current political system to stop AGI.
My question is, what do you think we can learn from the climate change movement? Some people say Extinction Rebellion or sort of civil disobedience gave a bad image to the movement. What's your take?
Yeah, I love this question. So,
can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so the question was, is there a risk, and forgive me for paraphrasing, but is there a risk in doing tactics that are similar to Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, in that they use roadblocks and they throw soup on paintings to sort of get attention and things like this? Is it a risk in that it could paint this group in a bad light in the eyes of the public? And the answer to that question is basically the media in the UK loves to make Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion look like the bad guys, but they don't really. The thing that we don't really hear over here in the States a lot is that they're actually effective. So Just Stop Oil in 2024 just achieved their first political demand in the UK Parliament of demanding no oil and gas licenses. So they actually are effective. It's just that the media loves to make them look bad. So. All right. Well, if no one has any more questions, I think we might wrap it up there. And thank you everyone for coming. If you raised your hand for one of the things we ask people to raise their hands for, and you have not filled out a registration form, would you mind raising your hand now so we can see who needs to fill one out that has not yet, who volunteered? Okay, great, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Really appreciate your time. So thank you.